There's a question on my mind that still baffles me to this day, and almost like deja vu, it repeated itself. Not only the question, but the event and result. Join me as I try to unravel this question by giving both background and flash forwarding to this present day. This video will be split into two parts, or rounds so to speak, but rounds will have greater meaning in this versus battle. Round 1, fight. There is an abnormality in the gaming sphere where that you would think a well-respected, high-selling IP would inevitably drive home similar, if not greater, success than its first outing. After all, when a fresh game no one ever heard of is released, it relies on huge marketing, word of mouth, from both critics and YouTubers' praise worldwide, to your friends convincing you the game is actually good. So let me take you back to the release date of Horizon Zero Dawn on February 28th, 2017. Okay, you might ask yourself, it's a release date, that's a good thing, right? Happy gamers, no delay, right? Wrong. So what's so unique about this date? Sony decided to unleash a brand new IP into the world merely only days after Nintendo was to launch its brand new console, the Nintendo Switch. Okay, a new console. Awesome. What gives? It launched with its flagship title, a little franchise some people may recognise. Not that it's anything special, but maybe in some pockets of the world, some dark corners of the internet, you may have heard whispers of a game franchise called The Legend of Zelda, released as the polar opposite to the mascot of Nintendo, Mario. The legend that is Zelda was released back in February 1986. Oh, look at that, February again. There was another title we mentioned that released in February 2017, right? A title I'm including in the title of this video. But I can't really remember, at least that's what Nintendo is foreshadowing. The Legend of Zelda has over 24 games released, including remakes, multiple platform entries, spin-offs, and characters appearing in other titles, amassing over 125 million sales in the franchise and ranked as one of the best-selling video game series ever. Okay, where was I going with this again? Yes. This little franchise was about to release something very different, an open world experience like no Zelda fan has ever seen. The promise to go where you want, when you want, introducing Breath of the Wild. The latest entry was expected to win Game of the Year, no competition, hands down. So it's quite perplexing that Sony decided to release a new IP days before this juggernaut. What gives? This makes no sense, which ultimately brings me to my question. Why did Sony release Horizon before such a highly anticipated game? It's almost as if it was being set up to fail. Is this Sony having no faith in the game? Just release it into the wild world, let it fester a little bit, trying to get some sales, while Hyrule and its denizens beat on it mercilessly. And if it fails, they can just go to the shareholders. It's okay guys, look, we tried, but Nintendo released its historic title and it trumped ours. Ah well, back to the drawing board. Or is it that they did not believe robotic dinosaurs in an open world would appeal to many people? Or maybe they tried to encourage people to not buy a Switch so more people would play PlayStation, and the fact that Switches, like any console on release, would be hard to come by. Either way, the fact is Sony was giving itself only a few days to sell as many copies as it can before Ganon and his minions trashed it. Even if people could not get their hands on the Switch, their hearts would still be drawn to it, saving up for it, waiting for it. They might not be able to afford Horizon and a Switch and Breath of the Wild all in quick succession. But it's not all about sales. The internet and news will be dominated by Breath of the Wild. Content creators in lustful indulgence, sheer hubris, will be salvitating and flaunting the title. So much so that Alloy, Horizon's lead character, may not be able to stand on her own 2 feet. As mentioned before, a fresh game no one has ever heard of is released. It relies on huge marketing, and the internet can set any game's fate. Although Horizon did appear favourable, it was undoubtedly overshadowed by Link and the Master Sword, or whatever weapon he got hold of, which would not break in 5 hits or less. Articles will go on to call Breath of the Wild the greatest game ever made, the defining game of our generation. So with articles of such praise, would Horizon come out unscathed? Well, not exactly. Undoubtedly, a chunk of Horizon sales were made while people were waiting for Breath of the Wild to release and get their hands on a Switch, which may have taken them months. So it may have came to a surprise that when Horizon Zero Dawn released on February 28th, 2017, that both Sony and players alike were in for a surprise. The title would be a monumental success, people applauding its gameplay and polished experience, emotional story and open world. So could Sony have unwittingly allowed one of the best games this generation fall prey to Nintendo? Could they have timed this better? Well, the short answer is yes. Coming back to a previous point I made, Sony may have relied too heavily on the fact that people may have not gotten their hands on a Switch and wanted to use the full might of the PlayStation, which had about 90 million units sold at the time, to try and eclipse Nintendo. The thing is, sadly, we may never know what exactly the executives were thinking and what their strategy was. And maybe they could be forgiven for this potential misjudgment if they did not do almost the exact same thing a second time around 5 years later. And here we are, the next versus match, about to begin. Round 2, fight. Horizon sold over 20 million units across PlayStation and later the PC port. This announcement caused even more hype for its sequel, Horizon Forbidden West, due to release. Yes, you may have guessed it, February 2022, the 18th to be precise. So we have the 28th of February 2017 and the 18th of February 2022. However, that was not the original launch date. The title was delayed from the initial 2021 due to impacts of the pandemic, which is very understandable, as many games were delayed. But what's not understandable is why I pose my question again. Why did Sony release Horizon right before such a highly anticipated game? You see, another game was gaining momentum, the hype train almost insufferable, so much so I had to duct tape my eyes shut to not see any more footage of trailers and gameplay about another tiny insignificant game franchise. Maybe some mutters were heard here and there, remnants of the last vestiges of light, some faint uttering of the phrases such as praise the sun, fear the old blood, shadows die twice. And now, rise tarnished. Is this truly deja vu? Sony had to repeat history twice. This time, the game was delayed, as mentioned, until February 18th. What I fail to understand is why they could not release it a tad bit earlier, or even a month later. In hindsight, releasing it later probably would have been a good idea to squash some bugs the game launched with. But not a good idea, because the game it competed against would rule all talk of the internet for months to come. I understand delaying games can come with a high cost, such as rebranding marketing material or changing physical inventory and the like, but I'm sure Horizon Forbidden West would have benefited greatly from this. Say what you want about Marvel and its movies, but it's like releasing your new movie on the same box office weekend of a Marvel movie. It's just not a good idea. Considering those movies will rake in hundreds of millions of dollars, and your movie may not even gain traction it may deserve. However, if you released it a little sooner, it may have stood the challenge that bit better. Or even take the bite and release it several months later, when the summer had much less major games slated for release. This would have cleared out the worst bugs and gave the game the best chance to succeed, so it would not be in the shadows of what was releasing exactly 1 week later. On the 25th of February 2022, a game which would change not only the accepted, even if it was quite terrible, standard open game format, but quite potentially its impact will have a resounding aftershock effect for decades to come. From Software, infamous developers of the Soulsborne series, were about to unleash their latest offering to a hungry audience. A game which they wanted to be overall more accessible by newer players to the audience, but still hold a gigantic challenge to veterans alike. This will be their first offering to the open world format, a format currently dominated by the likes of Ubisoft. A world known as Elden Ring. You might have heard of it. I know I certainly have. And what was the audience reaction like? The game took over the internet, legions of videos being created, articles upon articles spouting its praise, many flaunting it a 10 out of 10 experience. Although it may have been seen as a masterpiece, every game has its flaws, and what held back Elden Ring, especially in the beginning, was its PC port, which was plagued with issues. What gripped people the most was how the open world was so different than the current open world games. There was no minimap. There was no quest text taking up the entire side of your right screen. There were no markers plaguing your interface. Heck, there wasn't even much of an interface. All you saw on your screen was your character, and you focused on the world and its surroundings, not loading into the map every 5 seconds to see if a question mark appeared representing some side quest or point of interest. Elden Ring looked at the design companies like Ubisoft continue to redefine and spat in their faces and went their own way, and players were here for it. They brought the sense of discovery. They wanted players to have a sense of discovery in their games, not being guided every step of the way. Although Elden Ring has a soft guidance feature at its resting sites, what's From Software delivered to the player was the statement: here is a world, go explore it. Every single thing you can see, you can go to. What other game had such a premise? Breath of the Wild. Now, in the defense of Horizon, From Software did delay Elden Ring initially to the 25th of February, and that is not Guerrilla Games' fault. However, what can be seen as a major error on their side was to not delay the game again. Maybe this was the aforementioned cost, but I would argue again, the delay would have made the game stand out much more and polished the bugs. Forbidden West is a gorgeous game and fleshed out world. It performed better on the PlayStation 4 than the PlayStation 5. This could have been ironed out. Elden Ring overshadowed the game so much that hardly anyone talked about it. Unlike its predecessor, which eventually found popularity and culminated over 20 million units sold, aided by the PC port. At that time, it was Sony and Nintendo, but now it's two games being released on the same platform, both catering to both the previous generation and current generation of the PlayStation. And Elden Ring had Xbox and a PC port at the exact same time, despite its massive issues, which were cleared up relatively quickly after launch. Forbidden West was a PlayStation exclusive, so it will not be getting a PC port anytime soon, which hampered and will continue to hamper its potential sales into the future. Elden Ring was poised correctly to capture as much interest, catering to a larger base. Forbidden West could not do this, almost as if it was destined to fail. To try aid with Forbidden West hype, Sony even gave the game away for free as part of the PlayStation Now before the release of the sequel, but all of this did not work. Forbidden West came down to more of the same old, with the glider function probably being its major standout, something they probably took out of Breath of the Wild's handbook. Other than that, there was really little innovation. The sad fact is it's not a bad game, but players may never get to experience it. whereas Elden Ring dominated reviews from before its release and well after its release, and that the general audience interest was not there to support Forbidden West. Once Elden Ring launched, Forbidden West sales dropped by 80% with continued decline. Although I don't have exact sales numbers for Horizon, rest assured it is pitiful compared to potentially what could have been. Sony usually flaunts when one of its games sells big. I guess that's why. Another monumental screw up. Why did Sony release Horizon right before a highly anticipated game? Not once, but twice. From underestimation to potential overestimation, between Horizon and its sequel, it's an answer we may never truly know. But on the bright side, if they make a Horizon 3, we know we are just about to get another generation-defining game. So thank you in advance, Horizon 3. And that's the video. So with my final take, if like Breath of the Wild before it, Sony only needed to allow Horizon to breathe. Thank you for watching the video. Please support the video by engaging with it, liking and subscribing if you wish for more content in the future. And in case I do not see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Jay signing out. Take care.